This is Chris Casey of WindRock Wealth Management. WindRock is a unique wealth management firm combining a top-down macroeconomic perspective with an entrepreneurial mindset to seize on investment opportunities. I'm pleased to be joined today by the economist Mark Thornton. Mark received his PhD in economics from Auburn University and is currently a senior fellow at the Mises Institute with a large number of publications to his name. Mark, thank you for joining us today.
Hey, Chris, it's great to be with you here today.
One publication in particular I'd like to address was published by you back in 2005 in the Quarterly Journal of Austrian Economics, and it was entitled Skyscrapers and Business Cycles. And since then, I've seen this so-called Skyscraper Index featured in a number of publications such as Barron's over the years. Can you provide the audience with an overview of the concept? Because I think it's really neat and intriguing, and I think it has some implications for people's investment considerations.
Absolutely, Chris. The connection between skyscrapers and business cycles was first noticed by an economist, Andrew Lawrence, who saw that the building of a world record-setting skyscraper was associated with a looming world economic crisis. And when I saw that in 1999, I immediately had the idea that this connects in very well with the Austrian theory of the business cycle. And so that was the basis of that 2005 journal article in the Quarterly Journal of Austrian Economics. And basically what I saw was that when central banks keep interest rates artificially low, that results in both a booming economy and ultimately, if they keep interest rates low enough, long enough, you'll see a world record-setting skyscraper, and then ultimately you'll see a world economic crisis. And so basically I provided a theoretical structure for connecting these periods of record-setting skyscrapers and all of the world economic crisis over the last 100 years.
And how good of a predictor is the index? I mean, I know in your paper you reference some other so-called, kind of unique, uh, apparently predictive but yet coincidental indications like the Super Bowl indicator, etc. What is the track record over the last 100 years for the skyscraper index in kind of foreshadowing a worldwide recession?
Yeah, like the Super Bowl indicator was perfect for a certain number of years, but as it wore on, the predictive quality of the Super Bowl indicator decayed. The skyscraper index is held up very well when you look at world economic crises. So it's not just national crises or recessions that we're talking about. It's got to be something big. But it accurately predicted the panic of 1907, which ultimately led to the creation of the Fed. It predicted the Great Depression. It predicted the stagflation of the 1970s and all of the terrible troubles we had in the early 1970s. It also predicted the Asian contagion, the tech stock bubble, and of course, more recently, the housing bubble uh, came unglued just as they started topping off the Burj Khalifa Tower in the United Arab Emirates. We've also gone back and found in the late 19th century, it also predicted some of the bad economic troubles back then. So we're stretching it. We're looking more at more history. We're looking at national records and seeing exactly how far this skyscraper curse or index can take us.
You know, I can attest from that from a personal standpoint. Here in Chicago, the Monadnock building was built in 1891. It was the world's tallest building, I think, at the time, at like 17 stories. It's a beautiful building, it's still in existence, and I mean that's smack dab in a decade of numerous panics or recessions at that time. Um, what about people that would argue like the Empire State Building was built during the Great Depression, in the Chrysler Building, etc.? How do you address those so-called criticisms?
Well, this indicator is not perfect. It doesn't time these things out to a millisecond. But all of those buildings, Wall Street Building, Chrysler Building, and the Empire State Building, were started during the boom of the 1920s, and then they were completed in the early years of the Great Depression, when the economy was really terrible. Um, and of course, as Rothbard shows, the Great Depression could have ended much quicker than it ultimately did because of the interventionist policies of Hoover and FDR.
Right, and that's the Austrian economist Murray Rothbard. What about when the skyscraper index is wrong? Has it been wrong over the years, either because there hasn't been a recession when a skyscraper went up, or because perhaps a skyscraper went up and it wasn't followed by some kind of worldwide crisis?
Well, the one thing that really stands out is the Woolworth Building, which was completed in 1913. And there was no economic crisis either in the United States or in the world. But of course, we actually did start to go in a very deep correction and recession in 1913. But because of the outbreak of World War I, the United States economy was saved because the Europeans were going to war and were importing raw materials, grains, and munitions and things of that nature. So in that case, World War I pulled us out of what looked like it was going to be a very severe economic crisis, and hence history is forgotten. There are other significant recessions. Um, for example, the Japanese problem that started in the late 1980s. And the problem there, I think, was the fact that while Japan was setting records at the time for its economy, there was really no way for the Japanese to set a world record because of the problem of earthquakes in Japan. Puts it at a very significant disadvantage in terms of building record-setting skyscrapers, but they were setting national records at the time.
Right, and a lot of people. I know you touched us on this earlier, but the index itself. I mean, obviously, no one's arguing that skyscrapers cause worldwide panics or recessions, but what is the underlying causality, if you could lay it out? And I think it would be helpful to this audience because a lot of people never really give any thought to what causes recessions in the first place, and I think that ties in pretty well with the description of why skyscrapers tend to have this predictive power.
Well, first of all, you have to think of skyscrapers as just an indicator that everybody can actually physically see. Whereas a lot of the changes in the economy that are involved in business cycles go unseen. And so it begins with, of course, the Federal Reserve keeping interest rates artificially low, below what would actually appear in the marketplace without that intervention. And those artificially low interest rates are what encourages entrepreneurs to make all sorts of new investments in the economy, big investments in the economy. And that includes record-setting skyscrapers, but it also includes new products, new companies, new distribution networks, new production facilities. So the actual effect of the interest rates permeates the economy. And what I find is that the skyscrapers, these record-setting skyscrapers, is just an indicator that we can actually see and we can actually time its development and tie it in with the business cycle. And so, and actually, Chris, um, the Economist magazine has criticized me and the skyscraper curse or skyscraper index precisely because they and some other economists didn't understand the nature of the causality. It's not that the record-setting skyscraper, causes the economic crisis. It's the interest rates cause both the record-setting skyscrapers and the boom-bust cycle. And so I'm actually preparing to go to New Orleans to a conference and present my side of the case about the relationship, the causal relationship between skyscrapers and economic crises. And it's not that the skyscrapers themselves are causing the boom or causing the bust. Um, but that's apparently what the Economist magazine thought.
Right. Essentially, it's a symptom of what happens when you artificially lower interest rates. Skyscrapers being the ultimate capital goods in some way are perhaps the most affected relative to the economy at large. What is it the skyscraper index tell us today as we sit here? I believe this year there was a new world's tallest building in Shanghai. I don't know if that was completed or not, or what the timing was. But what does it tell us about the worldwide economy today?
Well, that's right, Chris. There was a record-setting skyscraper for China. Their record was topped off this past summer. So it reaches that height, and it has to be the height is based on the number of usable, inhabitable floors. It can't be just an antenna or a spire or something like that. And so that occurred this past summer. They're still working on the building. It hasn't opened up yet. And that coincides just prior to where the Chinese stock market and economy started faltering. And so we expect that trend to continue on through the point where that building is completed and open for use by the general public. More broadly or more globally, there is a building called the Kingdom Tower, which is under construction in Saudi Arabia. And that project, if it comes to fruition, will set a new world's record. The building is designed to be 1 kilometer tall, which would vastly outdo anything that's been built on Earth. But however, it's actually only sets the record by a few floors. I think less than 12 stories higher than the previous record, which was the Burj Khalifa Tower in Dubai that set the record in 2007. And so we have a very ominous outlook right now. The skyscraper alert was issued a year and a half ago when this project, the groundbreaking took place. That means when you see the alert, there's still time to make money in the economy because the project is going to take several years to complete. Uh, but now we're looking at a situation where that building could be topped off, again, not completed, not open to the general public, but topped off within about 12 months or so. So it's time to be, we haven't issued a skyscraper alert, but it's definitely time to be becoming more cautious.
Well,
Uh,
that's uncanny, especially with the Chinese markets melting over the summer. Pretty much exactly when you had mentioned the timing of that building was. Have you ever looked at from a longer term perspective skyscrapers as being perhaps also indicative of societies embracing free markets? With the notable exception of the Saudi Arabian property. If you look back over the last perhaps tallest buildings built over the last 20 years, it seems like it's all Asia. It's Dubai, then China, Malaysia, Taiwan, etc. I know Ayn Rand wrote a famous article years ago called "The Monument Builders," where she talked about how there's clearly a correlation there. Have you ever looked at that, or what are your thoughts there?
well, Chris, there is certainly something to be said there because the world's tallest structure and these mega projects do get constructed in economies that are robustly growing, integrating their economies so that skyscrapers are necessary. So if you go from a rural to an urban to a high-tech economy, you're going to need more skyscrapers. And so the vibrancy, the robustness of these economies tells us that implicitly they're accepting ideas about the free market. And so, skyscraper building is dominating in the United States for so very long in New York and in Chicago. And now that has moved to elsewhere around the world. And so you're seeing skyscrapers built in Asia, in the Middle East, and in Europe, and really around the world in places that are embracing free market ideas and and having a robust economy that goes along with that ideological change.
This is interesting. It's the skyscraper index is obviously one piece in the puzzle of looking at the investment horizon as far as when recessions will happen. You had mentioned an alert. Do you actually issue an alert somewhere, or is this something that we should just have our antenna up and look for in Economist or Barron's or what have you, as far as when there's a flash that things could be turning down in the near future?
Well, I certainly would like to have the time and resources to be able to do that. And but frankly, a lot of these projects are not well known. It's very hard to get information about them in projects outside the United States. And so it's difficult to get the information in. And frankly, I did not even know that China was trying to build a new world's record. They had just completed a previous Chinese record, and so I didn't even know that was in place until it actually got close to the top. And so, unfortunately, I do plan on following the situation in the Kingdom Tower much more closely, and uh, and I certainly will alert you and your audience to be alert when it happens.
Well, that's very interesting. Mark, we appreciate your time, and we'll look for future updates on the index itself. Thank you.
You're very welcome, Chris. And also, of course, I'll be posting more uh, stories about the skyscraper curse on Mises.org.
Great. Well, certainly everyone should check that out. Thank you, Mark, for your time.
Thank you, Chris.